button. Okay. Liv, I'll turn it back to you.
You. All right. Well, I had a nice conversation with my group. I hope you all were able to kind of just reconnect in this topic again and get ready for a little more. So now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So today we're going to talk a bit more about the role.
Sorry, Liv, I
Sorry.
muted you again.
Sorry. Nope, no
Sorry, I'll
worries.
stop doing that.
No, I know, I get it. So today we're going to talk more about the role of teachers in supporting student well-being, obviously through the lens of decreasing screen use and increasing play, and identify strategies and tools for supporting teachers themselves who are facing anxiety and kind of dealing with this turmoil as well, including play for them. Next slide. So setting intentions, just, kind of our additional grounding for all of you and for just doing this work. Obviously, we want to take care of ourselves. Remember, like on the plane, you give yourself oxygen before helping others. And we know this is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work on our own part as well. Engage fully with us and definitely over the next few weeks when you bring this to your school community, and we're here to hear from you and support you in your risks and any discomfort you might feel. Being a vulnerable and curious learner, I think we're all here because we're passionate about education, which means we're probably lifelong learners. And honor the risk-taking and vulnerability of others as well. So one thing we just kind of wanted to also start off with or elevate from the book is this idea that he talks about collective effervescence. So this idea that, these strong communities don't just appear when you're all in the same room together. There's typically a really strong community is going to have something that we all experience together, hopefully positive, meaningful, a shared strong experience that what he describes as lifting people up. So this can be in all sorts of settings. Obviously, we know there's like sports stadiums and there's religious settings, but there's also, I grabbed this picture of like an assembly. I remember my daughter coming home one day from one of her first weeks of middle school and having one of these big assemblies where it was just a lot of rah, like a homecoming experience, really. That was the first time she'd experienced that. And it was really a collective effervescence of just feeling like ready to do whatever she needed to do for her school. And so how important that is for us as the adults in the school and maybe, the behind the scenes experience needing that collective effervescence to really work together, to collaborate and feel like we're all in it and we're ready to share the load together. And that's definitely part of this work in changing some of our policies and practices to better support students, but it's really better supporting ourselves and our community too. So the next slide is just kind of a simple example of this. So through the preschool development grant, so I'm in the early ed division, we were able to support, I think it was 5 schools, classrooms really bringing more outdoor instruction and play into their kindergarten classroom, but they were required to do it through some shared collaboration, both with pre-K, first grade, and with community partnerships as well to do this work. And of course, we heard lots of wonderful things about how much the students loved it and all these benefits of learning. But this is one quote from the final report from Harambee Elementary School. And what we heard in all the final reports and in other anecdotal conversations is through these experience, specific in outdoor learning and playful, like all in it together experiences, a real support that staff feel. So this quote, I'm going to read it. We believe that our pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade team members have enjoyed getting to know each other, learning together, and planning together. This outdoor education grant has brought our pre-K teachers and elementary teachers together. There used to be a divide. We didn't know each other and we didn't collaborate. It has been wonderful to come together to create this outdoor space for these young children. And so just wanted to share this as an example of, yes, there was really a pretty small amount of funding behind this. It was really the all in it together. Let's do something different for our students and let's work together to get it done and play. And it was all about being playful, being outside, and this really team camaraderie that was able to grow through this change. And so hoping that inspires some of you too to just, I know there's conversations about bringing this to districts, bringing this to your schools, doing this work together, and that it can be really powerful for the adults as well, not just seeing benefits for students. So I'm going to leave it, pass it off to one of my colleagues for the next piece.
Thanks, Liv. That's me. And a reiteration that everything Liv just said is you see pictures of young children here. It is not age or grade specific. It is all grades. So I want those of you who work with older students or primarily supporting adults to see connections of what this might look like. We're going to spend some time today talking about how we pulled back from the screens and from social media. But we want to, before we do, I want to point out that the author does share with us some ideas about why do we have social media and what is the benefit. So I think we'd be remiss without saying, yeah, there are some good things, that there is a type of community that can be built. There are people with which you have an affinity that you wouldn't necessarily have found otherwise. That information can be accessed. You can express yourself in particular ways, and there are opportunities to learn about people who are different from you. So he does point out these as something to be aware of. What the caveat with that is yeah, if we do this in a way that is purposeful and structured, and how do schools play a role in supporting those benefits? So he talks about the unfettered access, that anything in moderation, and that is where we have overridden those benefits by having this carte blanche use of social media. And then it's not just about that individual who is interacting. It becomes endemic to the culture, and it impacts the culture at large and how we interact with each other. And he lists a few of these data points that share what occurs as a result of social media. And he shares a lot of data about what we're seeing in our students, in girls versus boys, and there's a lot there. So you can certainly do a deep dive if you want to know more about the specifics in the data. We want to be focused here on, okay, what do we do with this? But know that this feeling you have about the impacts of social media is not just a feeling. It is grounded in data. And it becomes even more complicated when we think about social media or internet access as an equity issue, and how are students disproportionately impacted based on income and race and all sorts of factors. So something for us to keep in mind is that the data he shares is not necessarily like any piece of data. It's not a monolith of our students. Our students are impacted differently. And I'll let you introduce our first voice from the field.
Sure. Before I do, I want you to draw, well, you stay on that slide for a minute, Liz. I want you to draw your attention to those four arrows. No matter who it is that's using social media more than they'd like to, or more than they think they should, or more than others think they should, these are some of the impacts that Haidt describes in his book. The eye contact, it was interesting to me, is less frequent. Even when you're not on social media, your eyes are so used to the scrolling and the scanning that you don't make good eye contact with people. Less laughter. That was one that was important to me. Lost practice making conversation. And in fact, the more we do it, the more lonely we become, even though we call it social media. I thought those were interesting points that he elevated in the book. Speaking of conversation, when I was reviewing the registration responses, I noted somebody had read a book called Reclaiming Conversation: The Power of Talk in a Digital Age. So I reached out to Koya Nightpipe on our next slide and said, tell me more about this book. Would you be willing to talk about what you're learning from reading this book? And we've linked it in the dashboard so you can look it up yourselves. But I asked, and Koya's got unstable internet today, so I'm hoping she's available and can unmute to share just a couple of minutes about why she read the book, what her takeaways are. Three of them I asked her to identify, and then how she or other leaders might apply what she's learning from that book to their practice. Koya, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I'm
Super.
on now. I just jumped on my phone because
Okay.
it's more stable. So hopefully you can hear me and see me. But I read this book for one of the classes. It was leadership development, I believe it was, I put down. And it was really, for me, eye-opening in a sense. But when one of the things that I guess it corroborated what I saw when I walked through my school sometimes. You see the kids just hunched over. They're like this, and it's just really they're so engrossed and involved with their phone. And then I thought that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book as well, because then I'd have all I could see, with some of the students and sometimes even some of the teachers or adults in the area. But I just thought this was a good book to read rather. I thought I got some great takeaways. One of them, and I guess I should kind of do a little caveat. Oh, I'm Koya Naipai, Minnesota Transition Charter School. I'm the Indigenous Education Coordinator. Hamatakiapie, Koya Hahepi Chinupa, Damatahan, St. Paul, Hamatahan, St. Francis, South Dakota. So I love being with you here today, and I usually I try to do my introductions, but this time I forgot. But having this book and reading it, one of the things that kind of came to mind, is, of course, with the culture is, some of the students just don't listen. They're not listening. They're not active listening. And with this book, it kind of brings to mind, it's like, I always want to teach the kids, they need to listen to their elders, and all of us are their elders. So one of the things is the younger people, just I would really like for them to put their phone down and then just listen. And of course, we have to do the same as well because we have these devices. I mean, I couldn't be here without my phone. So, it's one of those things where it's a must have kind of thing, but then only for school or work. But um, I wanted to just, let's see,
Oh,
have the conversation. I'm sorry, it looks like I was able to do something here on my computer, but it's not able to do it. But the one of the things that, like I said, the takeaways is, we have our conversations and we have the conversations with ourselves, and we have to have those because that's kind of brings in our clarity. So that's the one-on-one, the one person conversation. Two people is just you and a friend or whoever you want to have that conversation with. There's two people, and then when you get more, you get the group, and you really should be able to have the conversation with more than just yourself. You have it with another person, and you have it with a group. This book also alludes to the like the fourth group, which is just really being out in nature and just being like reconnected with the things around you, and to really have that a kind of like a centering conversation with what's outside of us. And then but then what I jumped into right away is, our young people, we really need to just have that, see if we can connect with them in the sense that I want them to listen, I want them to learn, but then too, I'll just read a little excerpt from the paper that I wrote. I said, I also think of how younger people don't listen to elders, which brought to mind what Turkle wrote. But when you think about the moment of life we are considering, it is not just that older people are supposed to be talking, younger people are supposed to be listening. This is the compact between generations. I was once told that some older cultures have a saying, when a young person misbehaves, it means that they had no one to tell them the old stories. And I think that's true. We just need to have some of the old teachings, some of the things that kind of center. We just need to visit with our students more, and we just need to have the phone put away. So I think it's a great book. I recommend it. And it's just one of the things where I too like to visit with people, and I like that connection. And I'd rather talk than email. I'd rather talk than text. So, but that's my take on it. And thank you for having me.
Koya, thank you so much. There's a couple of things that come to mind that I want to underscore for her. I remember a time when I walked into an elementary classroom and they had just had a training from a professional outside of the district, and they were learning turn and talks. And I was immediately struck by, okay, everybody's talking at each other. Who is listening in this room? So I right away taught my staff, okay, we need to call them turn talk and listens. We need to teach our kids how to listen to each other, not just talk at each other to show what they know. And I just would elevate that as a thing we unintentionally do. We're trying to find out what do they know and do this formative assessment, but where are we actually teaching them to listen to each other and listen well? Turn and learn. Thank you, Christina. The other thing that came to mind is this whole reclaiming conversation. I meant to say this before Koya even talked about the book, but when I first read about it, I thought, really, she said it. It's conversation with yourself, conversation with your family, conversation with adults in your learning community, conversation with and between kids. Like, how are we teaching conversation skills? And then the last thing she said that I wanted to kind of elevate, I've lost. I've forgotten about it. So moving on.
And this is Becky. Could I, when Koya was sharing, there was just something that resonated. Could I share that?
Sure.
I just found, Koya, when you were sharing that, trust is so foundational in any relationship. And the way to build that trust is when you have those conversations. It's often very difficult to build trust when you're texting or when you're on social media. But when you sit down to actually see people's facial responses, verbals, nonverbals, is when that trust really develops.
Thank you, Becky. And you just gave me a moment to recall what I was going to share. Liz and I have both been involved in tribal relations training at the state level. And one of the most poignant takeaways for me was when we were listening to a panel of elders and they explained how in the indigenous culture, they don't interrupt each other. And it's so different from our white culture where we have to get our thing in and we have to get the next thing said. And that was so moving to me. Like, wow. And it takes discipline to not interrupt a child, to not interrupt another adult, to not interrupt my husband. I have to really think. It's just so patient and respectful to wait until they're finished. So another thing about conversation. Koya, thanks again for elevating that. I'm going to tag Liz.
Thank you. I remember you telling me about that, and it makes me reflect. Where do I interrupt? Where I think I'm being helpful, maybe, and I'm not. So we want to segue into our second voice from the field, who's going to share a bit about cell phone policy. But first, I want to reiterate the four main takeaways that the author shares. And we're going to touch on this throughout the series. But he shares four main takeaways. And I start here because we did get some feedback on the feedback form from someone saying we need to talk about the elephant in the room. And from the context, we are interpreting that as the elephant is all of the things we cannot control. Maybe I can take away cell phones in these four walls. I cannot control what happens at home. I cannot control what parents do, what happens between students outside of school. So we recognize that, and I'm the kind of person who continues to advocate for keeping it personal, local, and immediate, knowing that there are much larger outside influences. So thinking about, okay, us within a
Beautiful day to be a recess parent.
Sorry, I'm gonna mute some people. Thanks, Anne. So thinking about where are we part of the solution? There's a lot in our world today that makes us feel powerless, and that we are pushing a very large rock up a very steep hill and by ourselves. And we want to think about where can we make an impact. And these are the four ways the author frames that. And when I think about these, I think of that giant boulder trying to push that up a hill. These are giant ideas to think about, is how do I take a group of middle schoolers who all have cell phones and suddenly they don't? What can I control within that? What can I control about what parents decide about social media, etc.? So in thinking about this, we want to think, okay, where do we start? If we want to get somewhere, if we want to take action that leads to collective action, what does that look like? And as a reminder, you are aware of the school cell phone policy. If you are interested in the language there, I can put the link to the revisor statute language in the dashboard as well if you are interested in that. But we want to frame our next leader in the context of, yes, you're being asked to develop a policy, and what might that look like? So I will turn it to Anne to introduce him.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Carol, for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in session 4, that kind of the things parents can do and how we can support them in that role. Another registration response was from Marty Fisher. He had talked about they were in the early stages of developing a cell phone policy, and knowing that every district was expected to do this statutorily, I thought, oh, let's learn about their process. So I reached out to him and was so grateful to hear what I heard about how they did it. And that's what I'm asking you to tune into, is what did they do in their process to co-develop this policy. Marty is actually going to be sharing with you something that he shared with the board. I posed for his school board locally. I posed 4 questions to him. What process did you and your team use to develop your digital well-being and electronic device policy? What did you experience as gratifying? What did you experience as challenging? And what advice might you offer leaders who are currently developing those policies? So I'm going to ask Marty to unmute and share.
Thanks. And
Ooh.
hopefully all of you can hear me. My voice is struggling. And here, one thing I want to say is that I think many of us are doing many things in terms of trying to work through the process of how to manage devices. I work at our high school happens to be grades 8 through 12, so we had a little touch of middle school as we work through it as well. So I'm hoping that the things I share here are helpful. I want to give a shout out to a few people. Trevor Shepard was a great resource for me from when I was at high school. Aaron Swoboda from Chanhassen High School, and Dr. Al Johnson from Two Rivers. So if those people are people you know, they were great resources for us. And if you go to the next slide, this is just simply a link to our policy. You can go to this policy if you want to read the details. Super exciting, not really, but it's the nuts and bolts, and every piece of it went through the process that I'm about to talk about. So moving into our process, I think it was fun. It was interesting for us, or it was needed for us to create the why. So the 5 whys right there. Some of them, I believe, are talked about in Anxious Generation. Some of them are from other research that we did. But I think the first bullet would be talked about by everybody, protecting the learning environment. But we talked about increasing student focus, reducing distractions, and enhancing mental health and developing habits appropriate for school. We also know it's a legal requirement that you already know about by March 15th. We didn't start our policy till second semester because we went through a process. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see that part of our process was really critically important to talk about digital well-being. And when you see that picture, it kind of gives you almost a relaxation mode of, oh, I have my phone on the beach. It's not just the beach anymore, it's both. And they do go together, right? I mean, for kids, they come to school and they don't not have their cell phone. Like, you're going to have your cell phone at school. The question is, where does it go and how do you manage it? And then how do you be well through the process of all the things that pull our stuff all different ways? So we wanted to start our digital well-being process before. I feel like the digital well-being process is the umbrella and the cell phone policy is just a piece of it. So as you see more details as the slides move ahead, you'll see that we came up with our SAD chapter, and Wake Up Watonka is our morning announcements crew. It's also a class we have here. We came up with 3 activities that we did in every classroom, every single, I would say once a couple months, maybe leading up to the start of the cell phone policy, which started in mid-January. And I'm not going to go into each of the activities. You can look at them, but kids calculated their screen time, and they did the math times the day, times the week, times the year, times about 30 years, and they lost years of their life on their cell phone. And some might say, well, they didn't lose it. Well, I would argue when you see the number, it's lost. But something to look at. So we want them to create some awareness of how often am I on this? Like, big picture, productive boredom. What does boredom mean versus productive boredom? There is a difference, and I learned a lot through that. And then productive use of social media, we started last week. And these will be ongoing efforts throughout the course of the years ahead and combined with our mental health efforts as well. And if you're not doing that along with a cell phone policy, it's only words on a page. As you kind of look through our process, I'm going to walk through that real quick. We wanted to make sure we got input of all the different stakeholders because we needed ownership in this process. If you don't have ownership in any process, you're probably going to only do a partial process. So we had a staff cell phone committee. We had students. We met 2 different times of students over involvements. And as we got that feedback, the next slide will show the consistent feedback we got was summarized in these bullets. And it's interesting that all the groups said these things together without knowing what the other group said. Please be consistent with the enforcement. The consistency matters because of the inconsistency that people see in their lives just too regularly. Relationships matter, teamwork, digital well-being is important. Please share these things. Beg us to share the digital well-being activities. I would argue some of them would have an excuse, even though they knew they should be doing it anyway. But it's working together, communication, and then recognizing it's a problem and a concern, but we can get through it. So students said the same things as well, not even knowing they're working from a list. If you go to the next slide quick, you'll kind of see that kind of where we went from there then. Is once we gained our insight, we chose to land on bell to bell, no cell. Now, I want to be clear, when sometimes you hear bell to bell, no cell, some schools hear that and go, the first bell to first hour to the last bell, last hour. Ours is bell to bell within the 7-period class day. And then some days we have a 4-period class day. So it varies by the day. But from the time that first bell rings to start whatever hour it ends, it's seen and not heard. And those are the reasons why. So we have these posters around the building, as well as the next slide, when we talk about not seen and not heard. So teachers have the option on where they put the device. That's where the optional part, some will put in a cell motel. Kids just walk in, put it in there, and it also includes AirPods. So it's cell phones and AirPods. Or they might have them leave them in their backpack. Some have a container on the table that they put them in so that but the phone is always available for a student to use or see if they need be. You know, the whole argument about the parent argument, what about emergency? What if I need it? What if we're in a lockdown? What if we have a school situation where I need it? The phone is never out of their visual sight, and it's never out of them actually going and grabbing it if they did have an emergency. I would argue that's 99% mental and emotional, and there's an attachment. And when they can get by that, you just have to have a visual for them and they can get by it. Once it's locked in some pouch somewhere, that's where that tension comes in. And I think it's more emotional driven than common sense driven. And so if you go to our next slide real quick, these are the posters we hang around the building. You'll see in the next slide. Every single classroom has this. You can read through the offenses. The offenses kind of escalate, not with consequences, but more of where does the phone go? We just got a student the other day, the first student since we started this in mid-January, that got to the third offense. And we actually had a parent meeting. It was really good. We created a plan for where that phone's going to go during certain times of the day because the student wasn't able to manage it themselves. First offense, they set it on teacher's desk. Second offense, they end up having in the office, pick it up at the end of the day, and we have the why. We've only had a handful of second offenses where we had about 60 first offenses. Easy to manage, but really critical is teachers communicating with parents on that first offense. Not coming from administration. I'm passionate about this. Teachers communicating on the first offense because it's about the relationships. We hear it all the time. And that relationships can be reestablished on why it's important that your child is not being distracted because what they're learning in my class is really, really important. But I want them to be present when I'm teaching these things. And then we asked the question, how's it going? That's my last slide. I think it's still too early because we're gonna be doing this in May. But look at some of the comments we're getting. Like right away, we heard it's so quiet around here. I thought you guys were just talking about it, but it's actually happening. Oh, I don't mind this. I can't believe how much I can get done in 30 minutes. I don't like not having my own music, but I also don't mind a break from my phone. Teachers talking about they understand it. My colleagues are consistent. Just even simple stuff like this is really good. I've heard other principals say terms like Scott Gangler used the term, it's a game changer. I would argue, we've only been doing it for about a month, but I would argue that that comment is probably going to be what we settle on. But again, I say a policy without a process is a failed policy, and it's just words on a page. We had a process, and I was asked to share it. Hopefully, it's helpful. I've stolen from a lot of you, my colleagues. Hopefully, you can steal some stuff from us. And thanks for the opportunity to share.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Marty. And you said something quite a bit ago that I think needs to be elevated because it was just sort of said. You said, "I'm learning a lot." I think that's part of the value of doing this collaboration with other partners and other stakeholders is we can be vulnerable learners and we can say, "Hey, yep, that's something to think about." Loved the emotional a part of seeing their cell phone away from them. I thought that was super helpful. And the consistency that teachers want, and teachers making that first call, that relationship when things go awry. Super thankful for what you did. We've linked his resources in the dashboard so that you can look at those later. In the next, we want to be sure that you have your last breakout room. So I'm going to honestly rush through these next slides because everything is linked in the dashboard, but I want you to be aware of the resources in case there's one that you might want to explore more deeply. The first one is Height and other authors having a teacher's guide. And it's got a lot of things in it that you might explore for now, but then maybe over the summer, pick one chunk of it or one piece of it to incorporate into your August professional learning. It's just got a lot of interesting links that he provides. And then the main idea, which many of you probably received through MASSP, they summarized the book in, kind of like the Cliff Notes. They summarized it in case that would help you save time in looking for that. The second resource that we've linked into the dashboard is the Pedagogy of Play. It's like basically a book, that PDF that's linked for you. Another one with a number of resources for teaching K-12 that might help with the digital well-being, that might help remind people that it's about making it playful and enjoyable, then they don't miss their phones as much. And then a third resource that we are linking is a template I actually created. To be honest, when I read this section of the book, I thought, yeah, okay, move over it. Even though I am a faith-filled spiritual woman, I thought, okay, I can get this. But the more I read that section, the more my brain went to, oh, wow, this is about pedagogy. What if we thought about it from a leadership lens? What if we created these things? He said we lost the wisdom traditions in our social media craze. And I created a template that you can play with or not play with, but with leader implications and with teacher implications. That what if our classrooms looked like this? What if our leadership, our faculty meetings included these components? So those are the resources we wanted you to know are linked in the dashboard. Liv is going to bring us quickly to our breakout
Yes.
space.
And this is just really quick as well. These are points about that shared culture of playful learning, kind of guidance for school leaders. It's on page 98, if I'm right, in the Pedagogy of Play, which, like Anne said, is an awesome free resource online. So just wanted to pull these out as some ideas, guidance on how to start bringing this work into your school community, because it's not just about like creating a room that people can go play in. There's more to it than that. So, and then I think we're on the last slide, right, for our breakout rooms. Is that correct?
Yeah, we wanted to share the different opportunities that we have. And something I wanted to point out is I added a resource that came to us from Roseville. They do very purposeful play, and it got us talking about the why would we choose play. So there, we were thinking of three different ways that you can be thinking about play is if my purpose is learning, I might use it in one way. If my purpose is mental health, if my purpose is take a break, then I might use it a different way. And if my purpose is to create constructive struggle or creativity, I might use it in a different way. So be thinking about your purpose of where might I implement these things. So I want to add a question for you to think about. I'm going to open up the rooms for us. And I moved some people around to make sure you have people in your group. I may move you again, just so you're aware. There's a lot of people not assigned. I will get you in there. And if you don't mind helping out with that.
I meant to start at the bottom of the list, but I started at the top. When we do this, when we share that, moving people, I'll start at the bottom.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I made one of the groups really large accidentally, but here we are. I'll put the feedback form in the chat for those in this room in case you might be able to go into the breakout and you'd like to work on that. I really appreciated Marty's sharing. That was a lot of information that he got in very concisely. That was
Agreed. Agreed. He has such a wonderful approach to, there were so many points I wanted to capture.
yeah. I think he hit on something that people really do worry about with locking away phones is that um it's like abstinence only education. There's it's got to be some middle ground, and the middle ground may be it's right there, or it's in
Yeah.
your pocket and we don't see it. So you don't take it out.
Yeah, it reminded me of addiction strategies.
Mhm.
How do we help people wean off of things?
Yeah.
That was that was really good.
Yeah.
And one of the people he gave credit to at the beginning, I appreciated that too, his shout out to the districts he worked with or learned from, is one of them that I hope will join the student session.
Oh, wonderful.
So we'll see, because they actually have their student, that's Al Johnson at 197. They actually have that student well-being committee.
And is that that's different from what Jen Benz is going to be talking about on the 31st.
I don't know, because I don't know what you arranged for her to talk about. That's yours, right? That's the counselor
Yeah,
training.
I haven't followed up with her yet. So I plan to meet with her more mid-March because I thought she could go a lot of different ways. So I wanted
I would
to
imagine her going kind of the bigger picture of parents, community connections. She can certainly bring up students if they've got a student advisory group or something like that, but I would imagine her going more to parents and community.
right. And that's 196. I thought that was one.
Yeah. Oh, no, they're different districts. Yep.
I always get those confused. You were short on time.
Are you able to give them a warning and close early?
Yeah, if I close now, it'll give them a 30-second warning.
Yeah, we probably
Never
want to do that to give them feedback time.
Okay. Yep. There we go. Hello, for those of you coming back, I'm adding in the feedback form. If you have a moment to provide us with some feedback, we know this was a really fast session, so we appreciate your patience with that. We wanted to make space for a lot of content. Welcome back. I am adding in the feedback form for you. We invite you to give us some feedback, and we welcome that from you and really appreciate any opportunity to improve and know there's a lot of information we can do. So we appreciate you helping us out with how we can balance all of these moving parts with so much content. So hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and please be in touch. Anne and Liv and I will stay on for a bit if you have questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.